Listen, call it a crisis, a glitch, or a quiet rebellion, but something undeniable is happening everywhere around you. Men are walking away from dating, not with anger, not with dramatic exits, but with something far more dangerous to the system, with silence. For years they chased, texted first, made the plans, held the conversations together, and carried relationships on their backs. They upgraded themselves like machines, better jobs, better bodies, better habits, better everything. They followed every rule society handed them, believing effort would eventually be rewarded. But no matter how much they improved, the appreciation never matched the sacrifice. The gratitude never matched the loyalty. The bar kept rising, the rules kept changing, and somehow being a good man quietly turned into being an underwhelming man. Eventually, something inside them didn't break. It woke up. Now those same men who once dreamed of marriage and connection sit in quiet apartments where peace finally replaces pressure. No emotional landmines, no constant tests, no conversations that feel like interviews. Just calm, just control, just clarity. And that peace feels better than love ever did. They started noticing the truth behind modern dating, that romance had turned into a performance, that effort became expected, that consistency was mocked, that stability was treated like boredom, that no matter how much a man gave, he could still be told he wasn't exciting enough, mysterious enough, or high status enough. So, they stopped playing, stopped auditioning, stopped searching for validation from people who kept them as temporary options while scouting for something better. And everything shifted. The man who used to send long messages now answers when he feels like it. The man who used to rearrange his schedule for a date now protects his schedule. The man who once feared being left on red now flips his phone over and returns to his purpose. This isn't coldness, it's survival. Because men didn't give up on dating. They gave up on trying to earn respect in a system that punishes sincerity and rewards emotional games. They realized a simple truth. When love becomes a test, the heart eventually stops showing up. So, an entire generation of men quietly said no. No to being replaceable. No to being measured instead of valued. No to pouring effort into people who only appreciate it when it's gone. They chose peace, and peace, for the first time, feels like winning. Winning back their time, winning back their confidence, winning back the parts of themselves they kept sacrificing to be enough. And that's what scares society the most. Not that men are angry, but that they are calm. Not that they are fighting, but that they have stepped away. A man terrified of being alone will tolerate anything. A man who has mastered solitude becomes untouchable. Men didn't give up on dating because they stopped believing in love. They stopped because love stopped believing in them. And now that they've tasted life without judgment, without tests, without emotional debt, it will take much more than pretty words and minimal effort to pull them back into the game. It didn't begin with anger. It began the night he looked at his phone, saw her dry reply, and, for the first time, decided not to keep the conversation alive. That tiny moment was the first crack. One message he didn't send. One plan he didn't remake. One disappointment he didn't chase after. From there, the shift spread quietly through his life. He remembered how many times he showed up with intention, energy, and hope, only to watch women vanish once the effort was no longer convenient. How many nights he stayed up comforting someone who forgot he existed the moment a more exciting option appeared. How many times he apologized just to keep a relationship from collapsing under expectations no man could meet. At some point, Effort stopped feeling meaningful and started feeling foolish. Dating used to feel hopeful. Now it felt like walking into an exam he didn't study for, not because he wasn't prepared, but because the rules were never given. Instead of meeting a person, he met a checklist. Be taller, be funnier, be confident, but not too confident, be emotional, but not too emotional, be masculine, but not in a way that offends anyone. The boundaries kept changing, and men began to realize something. They weren't partners anymore. They were applicants. So the withdrawal began. First, mentally. He stopped leaning forward. He responded instead of initiating, observed instead of impressed. Then emotionally. He stopped imagining a future with someone who could replace him without blinking. He stopped attaching his worth to reply times. Finally, physically. Fewer dates, fewer plans, fewer chances. People called it laziness. It wasn't laziness. It was self-preservation. The man who once sent good morning texts now saves that energy for his own life. The man who once planned every date now simply says, let him know when she's free. The man who once panicked over being left on red now shrugs and goes back to training, reading, building something real. Rejection fatigue rewires a man. After enough ghosting, mixed signals, and empty promises, he no longer assumes he's the problem. He starts questioning the system itself. And once that realization lands, everything changes. He notices something powerful. Peace feels better than validation. The first Saturday alone, without checking his phone every 10 minutes, hits differently. No tension, no waiting, no overthinking. The first week without trying to impress anyone gives him more energy than any relationship ever did. The first quiet night without replaying conversations feels like escaping a psychological cage he didn't know he was in. He creates a new rule. He will match effort, never overgive again. If she's interested, he'll see it. If she's indifferent, he won't fix it. If she tests him, he won't jump, because his worth isn't up for negotiation anymore. This is why men started leaving messages unanswered, invitations unaccepted, and conflicts unresolved. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally understood how dangerously they had been over-caring. Ask men today what they fear, and it isn't being single. It's being drained. It's losing themselves in relationships where they are valued only when they overperform. It's waking up one day, realizing they gave everything and got nothing back but silence. That fear created the shift. So men redirected their energy into the gym, into their work, into hobbies, discipline, and routines that reward consistency instead of punishing it. And in that process, something unexpected happened. When they stopped trying so hard to be loved, they finally learned to love their own life. And once a man reaches that point, no guilt trip, no lecture, and no emotional demand will ever pull him back into the old version of himself.
There was a time when a man's effort meant something. When showing up, trying, caring, and being loyal actually mattered. But modern dating changed the rules. Slowly, his efforts stopped being valuable. Not because he stopped giving, but because nobody noticed anymore. His kindness became expected. His generosity became routine. His loyalty became invisible. He planned the dates, paid the bill, showed up with sincerity, and watched it get treated like background noise. She rolled her eyes at his manners, called his compliments cringe, and posted the date online without mentioning him at all. The moment he realized effort no longer held value, something inside him shut down. He stopped asking what else he could do and started asking the harder question, why doesn't any of this matter? Modern dating turned men from partners into placeholders, useful until replaced, valuable until criticized. And the more he gave, the less she cared. So he pulled back, quietly. No drama, no announcement. He stopped calling, stopped planning, stopped overgiving. Not because he stopped loving, but because giving began to feel worthless. Now you find him in places where effort still matters, at the gym, at work, in his goals, in his peace. He pours energy into things that won't belittle him or compare him to fantasies. And he discovered a truth nobody warned him about. Peace feels better than one-sided appreciation. A man can survive rejection, but when you make his effort meaningless, you lose him forever.
Modern dating didn't collapse overnight. It didn't explode. It dissolved. Bit by bit, swipe by swipe, until what was once connection became a marketplace, and what was once love became a competition. There was a time when two people met naturally, through friends, at work, at a coffee shop, in a moment nobody planned. There was curiosity, nervousness, a spark that felt human. Now, everything feels manufactured, optimized, filtered. You're not meeting a person anymore. You're meeting a brand, a highlight reel, a profile crafted to impress strangers but unable to sustain a real conversation. Men notice the shift first, that uncomfortable sense that they aren't connecting, they're auditioning, that their value depends on angles, lighting, and a bio catchy enough to compete with thousands. Dating apps turned affection into an algorithm, turning people into products and attention into currency. Women get flooded with messages from everywhere. Men get silence. Not because men are worse, not at all, but because the system is designed for imbalance. When attention becomes infinite, appreciation becomes scarce. He matches with dozens, maybe hundreds, but none of it means anything. He sends a message and waits. She replies 2 days later with a one-word answer. He tries again. She loses interest before the connection even begins. It's not rejection, it's apathy, and apathy is worse. Men got tired of competing in a game where the rules kept shifting, tired of being judged by metrics no human being can live up to, tired of trying to stand out to people who are already planning their next swipe. So they stopped playing. They deleted the apps. They stopped chasing strangers who barely read their messages. They realized something brutal and honest. The modern dating scene isn't real. It's entertainment, distraction, endless browsing disguised as intimacy. You can talk to 500 people and still feel more alone than ever. Because in a world of infinite options, nobody is chosen deeply. Why commit when replacements appear instantly? Why invest when fantasy always seems better than reality? And here's the truth men figured out. Women aren't the problem. Men aren't the problem. The system is. A system designed to keep everyone searching, comparing, scrolling, never settling long enough to feel anything real. So men walked away, not because they gave up on love, but because modern dating turned love into a transaction. And when they stepped back from the noise, they discovered something they didn't expect. The first real moment of peace they felt in years.
At first, the silence felt strange, uncomfortable even. A man who spent years trying, texting, planning, proving, suddenly found himself alone with nothing but his own thoughts. No unread messages, no passive-aggressive hints, no emotional roller coaster waiting for him the moment he unlocked his phone. Just stillness. But then something shifted. The silence stopped feeling empty and started feeling clean. The tension that lived in his shoulders for years slowly disappeared. His mind, once crowded with overthinking and second-guessing, finally had space to breathe. For the first time in a long time, life felt simple. He wakes up when he wants to, not when someone demands attention. He goes to the gym and feels his body come alive again. He cooks his own meals, listens to music he actually enjoys, drives at night with the windows down and the world quiet around him. The small things, the ones he used to overlook, start feeling like luxury. There are no sudden arguments, no accusations, no hidden tests, no feeling that he has to perform a version of himself to keep someone else satisfied. In that silence, he rediscovers himself. Not the man who was trying to be enough for someone else, but the man he actually is when nobody is watching. Peace becomes addictive. More addictive than affection, more fulfilling than validation. He realizes he doesn't miss chaos, he was just used to it. He doesn't miss the constant pressure, he had simply normalized it. Now solitude isn't loneliness. It's recovery, it's strength, it's stability. He starts building his life piece by piece. A better routine, a healthier mind, stronger habits, more discipline, and with every improvement, he quietly understands something that modern dating tried to hide. Happiness doesn't come from being chosen, it comes from choosing yourself. He's not afraid of being single. He's afraid of losing the peace he fought for. And ironically, that peace makes him more attractive than he ever was before. Because a man who is centered, grounded, self-contained, he doesn't chase, he doesn't beg, he doesn't cling. He simply exists with quiet confidence, and that energy says everything. Men didn't walk away because they stopped believing in love, they walked away because they finally experienced peace. And once a man knows the taste of peace, he'll never trade it for chaos again.
The moment men found peace, the world suddenly treated it like a problem. When they worked non-stop, society accused them of being emotionally unavailable. When they chased love, they were told they weren't ambitious enough. When they finally stopped chasing altogether, they were labeled bitter, broken, or afraid. It didn't matter what path they chose, somehow the blame always circled back to them. A man speaks up and he's toxic. He stays silent and he's weak. He leads and he's controlling. He follows and he's spineless. The rules keep changing, yet the judgment never does. For years, men gave effort, loyalty, and consistency, believing these things still meant something. But instead of appreciation, they received criticism dressed as empowerment. You can see it everywhere. Online jokes about useless men, memes mocking fathers, husbands, boyfriends, endless commentary about how men should do better, even though every standard has been shifted so far that success is nearly impossible. If the same jokes were reversed, the world would explode. But when it targets men, it's considered harmless fun. What's worse is that most men aren't even angry anymore. They're numb. They've adapted. They've learned to move quietly, to avoid the places where they are misinterpreted, criticized, or treated like emotional tools instead of human beings. They've watched society celebrate women who set boundaries, but shame men who do the same. They've watched independence praised when women choose it, but labeled cowardice when men choose it. Men didn't walk away because they hate women. They walked away because they were tired of being punished no matter what they did. Tired of pretending they don't feel pain. Tired of being treated as if masculinity itself is a flaw. Tired of giving everything and being told it's the bare minimum. So, they step back. Not to hide,
not to avoid responsibility, but to reclaim dignity. They build quieter lives where they're not judged for wanting simplicity. They protect their peace because they learned it's the only thing no one can take from them. And here's the irony. The more society tries to shame these men, the stronger they become. You can't shame a man who no longer depends on your approval. You can't manipulate someone who isn't afraid to walk away. You can't control someone who has discovered that solitude hurts far less than being unappreciated. Men aren't disappearing. They're just refusing to show up in places where their presence was never valued. And the world is only now beginning to feel the difference.
When men finally walked away, the world didn't notice at first. No drama, no announcements, just a quiet absence. Dates stopped getting planned, messages stopped being sent, and the dependable presence men once offered simply faded. Not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. They didn't leave to prove anything. They left because they were tired of being drained, tired of relationships that made them disappear inside themselves. And on the other side of that silence, they found something far more powerful than romance: clarity. For the first time, they heard their own thoughts. They realized peace didn't come from being chosen, praised, or validated. It came from finally liking who they were when nobody demanded anything from them. So they built lives that didn't depend on approval, lives made of purpose, discipline, and calm. Men never wanted to be kings, they just wanted their loyalty to matter. But when the world showed them it didn't, they stopped giving it away. Now you find them where their energy is respected, in the gym, in their work, in their crafts, in the quiet routines that rebuild a man from the inside out. They're not bitter, they're rebuilding. They're not hiding, they're healing. And with each day, they become more grounded, more intentional, more whole. The man who once begged for love now protects his peace like something sacred. He doesn't chase chaos. He doesn't gamble his sanity. And surprisingly, the more he centers himself, the more he attracts women who value calmness instead of testing it. When a grounded man meets a grounded woman, there are no games, just understanding, because both have lived through the noise, and both are done with it. Men aren't rejecting women. They're rejecting a system that made their worth conditional. They're rejecting emotional labor disguised as love. They're rejecting the idea that they must lose themselves to be wanted. And now, when you ask them if they're lonely, they answer with a quiet certainty that shakes the entire dating world. No, I'm at peace. In the end, men didn't disappear. They simply chose themselves. And sometimes, that's where real happiness finally begins.